6:42 in the morning. We're live in the Allstate Showcase studio. Everybody today ought to take a moment to thank the Fisher House Foundation, who has stepped up where the government has failed miserably to help combat vets in agreeing to finance death benefits that the Pentagon couldn't pay because of the government shutdown. It's an outrageous, embarrassing turn of events. I want to ask Tammy Duckworth about that, but first, the representative from the great state of Illinois, and yes, we are still the great state of Illinois, in her first year in Congress. It's been pretty eventful, I know, but you've had quite an eventful week. Can you tell everybody who Scott Gillis is and about meeting him after all these years?
Oh, my goodness, Steve. Good morning.
Hi.
Yeah, so Scott Gillis was a young man, a soldier who worked in the combat surgical hospital in Baghdad on the day that I was hurt. And apparently he was the one that helped carry me off the medevac helicopter, and he started my IV lines. And I received a call earlier this week that he wanted, introducing himself and saying he wanted to meet with me. So I said, absolutely. And I got to meet him this week. It was really just thrilling to get to see him and be able to thank him for helping to save my life.
Well, and literally save your life. And after all these years, I can't imagine how emotional that must have been.
It's very emotional. I've over the years met individuals during that chain of survival, that chain of rescue, and every time it's incredibly emotional because I wouldn't be here to do the job that I'm doing. I wouldn't be here to, kiss my husband good morning every morning, to hug my mom, if it were not for just incredibly selfless folks like him.
You happen to live in Northern Virginia after all these years, so you go from nearly dying on the other side of the world to the United States Congress, and here's a guy who treated 2,000 patients in his time in Iraq, and when Sergeant Gillis goes into the private life, he ends up seeing you in the Democratic National Convention last year, and I guess it was his wife who kind of pushed to meet, right?
I think it was. He saw me on TV, and had such an emotional, negative reaction. I think it just opened that whole portion of his life, and his post-traumatic stress came back, and it reminded him, and she just really pushed him to, figure out who I was and to see it as a positive thing. And she pushed him to come meet with me because he really needed closure. For those of us who were wounded, we received extensive care and extensive mental health counseling while we were in the hospital. But these young men and women who, were in Iraq one day and 2 weeks later were back home, back in civilian life, they didn't get that kind of help.
Right.
And so I was just so thrilled to get to meet Scott.
Yeah, it sounds like it was a great meeting. All right, let's shift gears here. How can we be in the greatest country on earth and drop the ball the way we have for veterans? And I know the argument is we can't pay for part of the government and not pay for all of it. Well, that's a ridiculous argument, considering the fact that we're doing that in so many different ways. And what does it say about us that we're not paying military death benefits?
Well, yeah, it says exactly what it says, which is that we've completely dropped the ball and we've let our veterans down and our military men and women down. What happened in this case was that when we passed the bill to extend military pay and benefits for our servicemen and women during the shutdown, there was an oversight because the death benefit is paid not to the service member but to the families. And so the families were excluded. But this is what happens when you try to run a country piecemeal and fund one portion at a time. It doesn't work. You're going to always overlook something. And thank God for the Fisher House Foundation. They're an amazing group of folks. I lived in the Fisher House for a year. And let me tell you, Ken Fisher and Arnold Fisher, the head of that family, are the most patriotic people you've ever met. And they never wore the uniform a single day in their lives, but they still love this country and have done so much for our military men and women.
Yeah, and if you'd like to support the Fisher House Foundation, I hope you'll do what I'm going to do today and make a contribution. You can do it online. You just Google Fisher House, Fisher, Fisher House Foundation, the amazing work they do, because they've literally stepped up to pay America's bills at this point. Because, Congresswoman, in 6 weeks we're going to be doing this again. It looks like we're going to have some sort of temporary 6-week kick the can down the road scenario here. So I assume it's going to be a priority to take care of this loophole for military pay in that period as well, right?
Yes, we already passed a piece of legislation yesterday that would fix the loophole. So it's over to the Senate today, and the Senate should pass it. The president has indicated he'll sign it. And so by the end of the week, this problem will be fixed. But the problem, Steve, is that there are going to be these issues all over the place. There was a VA bill last week that funded the VA, but it didn't fund further processing of new claims at the VA. So the 800,000, veteran backlog is only going to grow. And I know this is something you've been worried about for a long time. You and I have had this conversation over and over. So it would fund veterans' pay, but it wouldn't fund getting rid of the backlog. It wouldn't fund. It zeroed out burials, so we couldn't inter our veterans. So you can't do this piecemeal. We absolutely have to be sure that we fix the whole problem. That bill was a $6 billion cut in funding for the VA. We need to fund the entire VA.
No, it's just outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous. The people that protect our freedoms and allow us to have the life we have here, and we can't even reach the minimum standard of care. And I mean, you know the VA better than I do by far. I would assume common sense tells me that if I was part of that backlog, I am now at least 2 weeks farther down in line. And it's getting worse every day, right?
It's absolutely getting worse every day because the VA was, that backlog was over 1 million. It's down to, according to the VA, about 400,000. I'm not sure if that's really the number. I suspect that it's higher than that. But they were getting rid of the backlog by paying people. They had mandatory overtime, so the claim processors had to do overtime, but they were being paid for it. Now, not only are those people not doing overtime, they're furloughed. They're not at the job.
This is ridiculous.
So that, it's absolutely ridiculous. So our veterans are going to have to wait even longer. And I'm worried about our World War II, our Korean War, and our Vietnam veterans. The Iraq and Afghanistan vets a little bit younger. But, if you've got cancer from Agent Orange, you can't afford to wait 18 months for your benefits. You need them now.
I appreciate you coming on. I'm thrilled that you got to meet Sergeant Gillis. And, regardless of whether you have 2 years or 40 years in Congress, the fact that you fight for your colleagues in the military and through the VA, if you get nothing else done in this dysfunctional government of ours, keep fighting that good fight.
Thanks, Steve. Hey, Scott was there to fight for my life. This is just payback. I owe every single one of our men and women in uniform. I owe the guys who didn't make it home. This is just payback. I'm not doing anything special. Just, what they did in downrange in the field was extraordinary, and I wouldn't be alive without guys like Scott.
Enjoy the day. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
That's Congresswoman Tammy Duckworth. Steve Cochran. Let's get right back to a complete traffic update.